Okay, I don't have a ton of time, so let's do this thing real quickly here. I posted that on Twitter that did you know that if you stopped printing money right now, if you completely, like for real, stop printing money, not this like, oh, we're going to curb inflation. No, but if you actually for real stop printing money, that businesses would start failing from largest to smallest. And I'm going to answer a question on this that like, well, why is it that they would go from large to smallest? Well, it's because the smaller businesses typically, they run on a little bit beefier margin because they can't afford necessarily in all cases to buy customers. Large companies for decades now have gotten so used to the idea of a very low interest rate or no interest rate environment that they've been buying customers, and they've been doing that by having progressively thinner and thinner and thinner margins. Now, in terms of absolute dollars, right, they have lots of dollars coming into their businesses, but their margins are increasingly smaller because they have to be able to compete with small businesses. So your small businesses tend to be able to hold out a little longer, and then there's also a cascading domino effect. So let me explain how that works. Let's say you're a giant company, and all of a sudden you can't get any more cheap money. And what happens is that all of a sudden you start either not, because, well, big companies do exactly what everybody else does. They go into what's called triage. And they start saying, okay, who can we not pay? Who can we push off later on? Well, that domino effect happens to a lot of their vendors and suppliers. And so then the vendors and suppliers, if they don't have that cash flow coming in, then they can't order components, let's say, and then they can't build them, they can't pay it has this cascading effect. So your bigger companies start having, there's a lot of inertia there. But remember, it's how inertia kind of works. When it finally does, when you take something that's really big and heavy and cumbersome and stop it on a dime, it makes a huge mess. So that's why they go from biggest to smallest. Your very small, nimble companies that are, a guy in a truck, so to speak, for lack of a better term, he's going to feel that a lot later on, before that actually hits him. So they kind of go biggest to smallest. So I hope that answers that question. I'll move on to the next thing here. This isn't really a Q&A. This is more just me kind of going through, cleaning up some notes here that over time folks have been asking about. So one of the things that I did see actually this is from QE Infinity. I think I recommend you follow them. They're on Twitter. I don't know if you're on, or X. So anyway, asked the question. He asked the general question to the ether about why is it people are refinancing their houses now, because the interest rates have dropped, so now there's a bunch of people flooding to refi their houses, but the interest rates are still significantly higher than they were 2-3 years ago. So, and I actually answered this question, at least from what I'm seeing, people need the money. Right? People have gotten so used to, Americans in particular, have gotten so used to an artificially low interest rate environment that they've been using their equity in their houses as cash machines. This is particularly true for boomers. Boomers have been doing this for like 20 years now, more than 20 years now, where they're like, oh, I'm a genius because I'm a financial towering genius because I bought a house in 1983 and I'm making all this money. Like, you're not making any money. It's your dollar becoming worthless, and the equity in your house, it's just showing that it's worth more money. Well, it's worth more money only because the currency's becoming worthless. So it's not that it actually appreciated. In fact, in a lot of cases, houses in fact they're considered a depreciating asset, right? If you look at the IRS depreciation schedules, you can depreciate houses, yet they appreciate. No, it's not them appreciating. It's that they're taxing their inflation. That's why they'll say oh, when you go to sell the house, they're like, oh, you made this huge gain. You bought that house in 1983, and for $41,000, and now you're going to sell it for $1.2 million to some hedge fund because you won't sell it to a human being. I mean, God forbid you sell it to someone who can actually afford the fucking house. You've got to sell it to a hedge fund. So you sell to a hedge fund, and you have what's called a gain, and then of course they want to tax all of that as well. Again, they're taxing their own inflation. I've covered this. This is just how it works. So they need to cash out to keep paying bills, to keep living the lifestyle, because they can't afford any of this, right? I mean, you understand, nobody can actually afford this. All those videos on TikTok, all those videos you see everywhere, where there's a bunch of young people saying, "How the hell is anybody surviving?" They're not. They're not. They're perpetually going into further and further and further and further debt. That's how this works. So the bottom half of the economy is going further into debt. The top half of the economy is trying to figure out where they can put all of this money to where that they don't, to where they can grow their investment. And you can't outrun inflation. Right? That's the. I mean, like, why would you inflate a currency if you enslaved everybody through fiat garbage currency, and then you inflated we're inflating the currency? Why would you have inflation if you couldn't, if your peasants could outrun you? You wouldn't. That's why you'll never outrun inflation, because they're going to inflate because they will always inflate the currency. It doesn't make any difference who it is. This is why you want to have a fixed base currency. You can go back to my older videos and you can see me talking about this, that when you have a fixed currency that doesn't move, right, that's grounded, then you get natural deflation. And natural deflation is not disinflation that we're seeing now. Natural deflation means this: the rich get richer, but the poor get richer as well. And by percentage, the poor get much richer much faster than the poor. Or excuse me, I'm sorry about that. The poor get rich faster than the rich, actually, by percentage. And certainly by lifestyle. And that terrifies a lot of rich people, because the last thing rich people want is for poor people to become rich. If that were the case, then who's going to dig their ditches for them? Who's going to do all of the work that they don't want to do, right? I mean, they would have to go get real jobs and shit. And that's just, we couldn't have that. So that's how that works. So another question. This was kind of a clever one. This is from somebody a few days ago and stuff. If all the top countries are in serious debt, to whom do we owe all this debt? Well, nobody. It's fake. It's paper. It's nonsense. Here's what happened. Anybody remember Weimar Republic Germany? This happened after World War I. Germany there was a Treaty of Versailles, and they imposed these reparations, these punitive reparations that were ridiculous on Germany, that they couldn't pay. And it had to be paid in gold. But then they took away all of Germany's gold. And then what was happening is they had to, so the German mark, or the Weimar Republic mark, they were using that to have to buy gold to pay the reparations. But what if you're devaluing the currency to the point where they can't really, you have this ever escalating price of gold to be able to pay these reparations? Well, it means you'll never pay it back. That's what happens. So what you have to do is say, I'm not paying you anything, and fuck all the way off. This is what many Americans are slowly starting to figure this out with unsecured debt. They're going to do triage, which I talked about before. They're going to start saying, I'm not going to pay you people anymore. You just bite the bag. Fuck all you. I'm not paying you people anything. And they're going to eventually do it with the taxes. Eventually, young people will do that. There will be young people who will figure out that they bought hundreds of millions of goddamn guns, and they're going to say, no, I'm not going to pay you anything. You get nothing from me. I encourage all of this behavior, by the way, because this is the correct way to look at it, because it's fake. All of this debt isn't really owed to anyone. It's a fake paper debt. See, think of it like this. Maybe I can sum it up like this. The rich, okay, and who am I talking about, the rich? I'm not talking about a guy who drives a Mercedes-Benz who lives in a nice house down the street. That's not who I'm fucking talking about. I'm talking about the elite people that were running all the, the Epstein Island people. Like, okay, that's who I'm talking about. Those people need you, right? They need the poor. They need the working class. They need all of us. All the people who are willing to do all that shit work that they don't want to do, they need all of us. We don't need them. And before any of you moronical boomers and some of you older Xers start going, well, I've never gotten a job from a poor person. Why would you want to get a job from a rich person? Why don't you create your own fucking job? Why don't you create your own business? Why would you need to get something from them at all? Well, I need the investment money. No, you could save your money. If your money was worth any fucking thing and it wasn't constantly being devalued, you'd be able to do this shit on your own, and you wouldn't need to be constantly fucking borrowing. Something to think about.